Andrew, good morning. Welcome back.
Morning, Mary. How are you? Hi, Vince.
Doing
Morning.
just great. We have to talk obviously about the Mueller report going to be released Thursday morning. The president tweeting a lot about this. One of two things: either the president's been briefed on what's in this, and it's something that he wants to discredit, or the president's been briefed on this and it's good news, and he's angry that there was this investigation to begin with. Which of those two do you think is true?
Well, I think the second thing is definitely going on. I think he's angry and he doesn't think there should have been an investigation to begin with. Whether he's concerned about what's in the report, I imagine he probably is, just because I don't think we should suspect that the report is going to be any different than what we've seen in the indictments and the factual statements that Mueller has filed up until now, which tended to be, to my mind, just looking back at the Papadopoulos indictment and the Roger Stone indictment and so on, it's usually 15 or 20 pages of, heavy breathing about almost collusion, feels like collusion, seems like collusion. Then you flip to the back page and there's nothing there. There's like somebody lied to the FBI about the date of a meeting. So, I don't really think that was an appropriate way to be casting, to be formulating charges. I think in most cases where somebody lies to an FBI agent, you get like a one-paragraph indictment saying they lied to an FBI agent. Here, they seem to use it as a pretext to tell a big narrative that, it ends up being all wind and no rain, and you may be about to get 400 pages of that. So if that's what the president's upset about, and that's what it turns out to be, I can't say as I blame him.
Andrew, what are you going to be looking forward to in the Mueller report?
The end of it.
Just like everybody else.
Look, I'm going to be looking at what I just said, because I think not too many people have noticed, or at least publicly noticed this about the Mueller investigation. I mean, I've complained about it a few times. I haven't seen a lot of it, but what I want to look at, which is what I've been looking at up until now, is how much, what we might call in the law surplusage there is. How much stuff is in there that just is in there for purposes of atmosphere and isn't what prosecutors are supposed to be about, which is you either have evidence for charges or you don't. And I've thought all along that one of the reasons that this whole thing, without a factual predicate for a crime, took place under the auspices of counterintelligence was to give them a reason to, tell a big story that didn't necessarily end up in crimes, but would make people look bad. And that's what I expect we're going to see.
What about any kind of entanglements with Russia as national security concerns? Could there be information in there about that proposal with the Trump Tower in Moscow? That is something that Adam Schiff has focused on now, whether the president is compromised by things such as that, any kind of business dealings with Russia. Is this just going to give the Democrats enough fodder to now launch another investigation into the president's business dealings?
Yeah, see, here's what I think about that. Mary, I think for a prosecutor, the issue is there a crime? And if people want to look at sub-criminal or non-criminal entanglements between, Russia and anybody else, I think that's fine. It's not really prosecutor work. But I think, number one, we ought to recognize that it's not compromising to have entanglements with Russia as long as they're not criminal entanglements. The only thing that people get compromised over, you could be politically embarrassed, but at this point, how are they going to be politically embarrassed? We've already heard that they have, a bunch of different connections with Russia. Usually, if you're going to do that as counterintelligence, it's classified because it's never supposed to see the light of day. Usually, if people don't get charged, the Justice Department doesn't go public with the evidence. That's why the rules call for a confidential report from the special counsel to the Attorney General. My attitude is if you want to make a big deal out of non-criminal connections between politicians and Russia, I'm all for it, because I'm like one of these, antediluvian Cold Warriors that Barack Obama mocked Mitt Romney over years ago. The 1980s want their foreign policy back, right? Ha ha ha! Everybody thought that was hilarious. My attitude is, if we're going to do this, let's do it for everybody, not just Trump. Let's look at everybody's connections to Russia, because this government, whether it's under Republicans or Democrats, for 30 years carried on like Russia was just peachy. They're our ally, they're our strategic partner, they're going to help us with counterterrorism. It's just great to do commerce with them. And then all of a sudden, November 8th, 2016 comes and the music stops, and Donald Trump is the guy left without a chair.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm fine with looking at it, because I think Russia's awful. But let's look at all of it. Let's look at everybody's connections.
Well, one of the bizarre features of all of this that you pointed out this week in a new column is that Julian Assange, of all people, has not been charged with anything related to colluding with Russia. And I thought that he was the linchpin. He was the centerpiece. WikiLeaks was the cutout that Russia was using to attack America. Why no charges related to that?
How about that, huh? Look, 2 years, the Justice Department, the FBI, the special counsel put the country through an investigation of the President of the United States on no factual predicate that he was in a conspiracy with Russia, under circumstances where, if you read the special counsel's indictments, it has to have been pretty clear to him since at least the end of 2017 that there was no Trump-Russia conspiracy, right? So that's one pile. Now we get to Assange, the guy who they've told us from the beginning is in the conspiracy with Russia. He's like the main conspirator, and they finally get him, and they can lodge charges against him, and they don't put in the Russia conspiracy. Isn't that amazing? And I think it's what I hate to say this, but I said this a year ago. I accept that Russia did this. I think they have good intelligence that he did it, but there's a big difference between an intelligence finding, which is basically a probability, and proving something beyond a reasonable doubt in court. And I've never thought that Mueller could have proved in court beyond a reasonable doubt that Russia did this, because in a jury trial, you would have to explain why the FBI and the Justice Department didn't do rudimentary investigative things like obtain the servers that you say have been hacked,
yes,
which you would do in any other case. I don't think they have a good reason for not having done that. I think that would bother a jury. And if they charged Assange with the Russia conspiracy, they would have to try to prove in court that Russia did it. And if they weren't able to do that because they didn't have compelling admissible evidence, I'm not saying it's not true. I'm not saying they don't have good intelligence on it.
Right.
But a lot of good intelligence you can't prove in court.
Yeah.
And if they weren't able to prove that in court, that would be a huge propaganda victory for the Kremlin.
After all this time, more questions than answers. Andrew McCarthy, thank you, sir.
Thanks so much.